Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm Liz, joining you from Central Virginia and the unceded lands of the Monacan Nation, and I am so glad that you are here with me. So, before we dive in today, I want to remind you that my new book, Home to Her Walking the Transformative Path of the Sacred Feminine, is now available for pre order from Womancraft Publishing. Woohoo! This book is my love note of sorts to the sacred feminine, and it's been informed by my own years of research, plus personal experiences, and a lot of the insights that my podcast guests have brought to me over the years. If you are pre ordering, we've got some fun perks for you, which includes a recorded Great Mother meditation, which is based on my own personal practice. And Lucy Pierce, the founder of Womancraft Publishing, will be turning the tables and interviewing me about my experience with writing the book and hosting this podcast. And we'll be taking your questions. It should be a lot of fun. So you can learn more and pre order the book at womancraftpublishing.com. I will put that in the show notes. And now let's get on with our conversation. So, if you listen to the show regularly, then you've probably heard me say on more than one occasion how lucky I feel to be in conversation with so many inspiring and powerful individuals. It is humbling and awe inspiring. And honestly, after every one of these conversations, I walk away feeling inspired and with more hope for our future than ever before, which I feel like is kind of a big thing to say given the state of the world. And I also cannot state this plainly enough either. The sacred feminine has not been erased in our world. That is like a storyline that we have, but I just feel like every person I talk to on the show demonstrates that that is not true. She is a living, vibrant reality, and she is walking among us right now, embodied in so many beautiful people. And that is especially true of how I feel about my guest today. So let me introduce her to you. Johanna Rivera is a mother, song and womb alchemist, community herbalist, and women's health educator. She weaves a beautiful tapestry of women's knowledge, the scientific with the intuitive, the political with the spiritual. She believes in a women's health approach that includes physical, emotional, and spiritual health. Since 2015, she has accompanied women in sacred feminine wisdom circles and one-on-one intuitive sessions where she holds a safe, earthy, and nurturing space to be in co-creation with your inner rhythms and ground into nourishing, deep rest, and self-care. I just want to be like, just even reading that. Originally from Puerto Rico, she now lives in Oslo, Norway, and she is joining us from her home there today. Joanna, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you're with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. That was heartwarming.
Mm-hmm. I know. Well, just reading your background or your bio, I'm like, I can't. There's so many threads that I know we're going to be able to pick up in this conversation. Um,
Mm.
but the place that I usually love to start with my guest is just to hearing a little bit about your spiritual background, and what that evolution has been like for you. So, what were you exposed to as a child, and how did that evolve, I suppose, to where you are today?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I've been, reflecting on this journey that has brought me from Puerto Rico to Norway. I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico, in the capital, Puerto Rico, which is like a big city. But my grandparents were from both sides, from the countryside, from the mountains, you say, in touch with nature. They were agricultural people, land keepers, and then they were also first generation displaced into the city for work, because of the industrialization of the island. And so my first memories of spirituality was watching my grandmother praying the rosary. And like I was thinking I was really called to that spiritual, that devotion. Like she would tell me, she would sit there and she would say, if you pray the rosary every day, you will gain a piece of heaven. I always remember that. And she was every day. with her rosary at 12 o'clock praying. And I really hold that in my heart from the memories. And of course, I mean, I have to say I was raised in the Catholic Church with the image of Mary, and also that submissive kind of, aspect of being the mother, being the
Yeah. Yes.
quiet one, or that uh, but now as I, reflect on it, it's like, yes, Mother Mary, it's part of the lineage of the sacred feminine, that we are reclaiming now.
Yes.
And I was raised also, music was a big part of my spiritual upbringing, spiritual and practical, because I was singing in the church choir as an 8-year old, and I did that until I was 30. So that was a big part of my spirituality, singing, the one who sings pray twice, all this, again, devotion. So I would say like devotion, ritual, yeah, Mother Mary in a way as a feminine uh, figure. Uh, and then the part of music that I also wanted to say, because it's tied also with my work now, is the drumming, or the not the drumming at an early stage, but my dad is a percussionist.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was raised with percussion since I can recall. But that was not for women,
Mm,
because you would deform your hands, playing the congas, which is what my dad played. So I was allowed to listen and to kind of, be with it, but I was never taught to that, that legacy wasn't passed directly uh, from my dad to me. And this is, again, one of the things that I am claiming now, that lineage. And now that I know all the aspects of the spirituality of drumming, of, how it was used. And maybe we can talk about that later if you want.
yes, definitely. I
But
do
yeah,
want to come back to that. But yes, please keep going. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah. But so when I reflect about it, those are the threads, that uh, 30, 40 years later, I am, sitting here with you, and I can, weave the thread back
Mhm.
from when I was a child, like a very small child.
Mhm.
And yeah, music, prayer,
Mhm. I love that.
devotion.
Yes, and I love that you can see that thread. You know, I know for me, growing up in a Christian tradition, it has taken me a really long time to see the thread, as you said, because at first I just saw um, the oppression of women's voices, and especially growing up in a Protestant tradition like I did. There, Mary is not even there. You know, she's just like she didn't even exist. Like you talk about her at Christmas, and that's it. Um, so but it has taken me some time to see how the different experiences I had growing up, whether I understood it at the time, I understand now how it's sort of leading me here. So I love your reflection on that. Um, and I wonder if you could speak to the divine feminine, the sacred feminine, and I'd be curious what words you choose for that too, like what words feel good in your heart, but how you began to really know her as an adult and how she began to show up in your life in a more powerful way.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, I started with the very kind of, where I'm now, where I can see the thread. But it's also true that I really had this moment of what you're explaining, like witnessing the oppression, like, okay, like everything that I knew to be true is, it's a lie. And the oppression of woman and how woman cannot be as equally participating in, in society, in church, in spirituality. When I became a mother, that was really, that's when I broke up with Christianity, I think,
Yeah.
because I don't know, the embodied experience of giving birth, being, in a different country and being without my family, having to take care of a new human and not knowing, you know, where I stood, it was a big realization for me. And again, everything I knew to be true, even my spirituality, which was a big, I think it was so hard because it was a big part of who I was, and it's a thread. Spirituality is what kept me uh, kind of throughout my whole life. When I moved from Puerto Rico into the United States, I was with the Jesuits priests there. That was a big part of, that transition. When I moved into Iraq, and, again, was like homeless spirituality, the Christian community in Iraq, again, the Jesuits, uh, were part of that. And then I came to Norway and became a mother. And then I had to kind of cut that because I realized the ways that we had been undermined, suppressed, the violence against women. Because when I was working in Iraq, I was working with environmental and women's rights. And I was working with water issues. And I met with indigenous communities from Iraq and from all over the world who were struggling to keep their water resources. And I saw how the water was a spiritual connection to the people. And, it all made sense. That moment, I say, when the portal opened and I became the source, of, I see it now as like that. But when it happened, I didn't. But when I became that portal of life, which is what every ancient tradition, saw as as the earth, the woman's bodies, how women's bodies were sacred, how the elements were sacred. And then I started to kind of weave the threads of, and researching about the feminine, and how women were the healers, women were the birth keepers, women were the tenders of life and death. And uh, because I saw how women were treated during birth, even here,
Yes.
uh, the medicalization,
Oh, yeah.
the decision making power, the inequality in the decision making power. So all those things kind of, you know, made the way for trying to build a different understanding, and based on my activism and my exposure to different uh, worldviews that I had when I was in Iraq, and um, it
Hmm.
kind of all made, you know, it
Yes.
fell into.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about too, you referenced it here, but just could you speak a little bit more about your activism work? So you were working with, was it with a nonprofit or an NGO around water rights?
Yeah, at the time I was working, in two different projects simultaneously. One was transboundary water issues, which is issues between countries, uh, Turkey and Iraq, who shares the Tigris River.
Yes.
So it was for rights to water, that Turkey wouldn't, send water into Iraq. So there were, human rights and environmental rights being violated. So we did a lot of work with the indigenous communities in both sides against the building of the dam.
Okay. Wow.
The dam was built in the end anyway, but there was a lot of grassroots organizing from the people to the government.
Wow. And what was your experience like as a woman that in that culture in Iraq?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a bit there's both good and bad things. There's a lot of oppression of women. Women cannot, study. They cannot marry who they want. Their families kind of arrange, who
Yeah.
they will marry with. We were working with honor killings, with child marriages,
Wow.
um, and yeah, what positive I'm trying to think. Um, I mean, woman is still the center of the family. There's a lot of um, there's a lot of conservative uh, things. Um, the good part that I was seeing is like I was living in the Kurdish region, so they were trying to to keep their identity as Kurdish people as opposed to uh, South. There had been, I mean, there's a lot of history of genocide and
Yeah.
um, oppression of minorities. So, and this was 2012, 13 is when I left. So this was before the whole ISIS uh,
Mm-hmm.
thing. But the part that I was living and working was very safe in the Kurdish region in the north. But I got to see the contrast also between the north and the south. So if you compare the north and the south, the north is very progressive, it's very secular,
Mm-hmm.
where the south is very like I had to go with the abaya, with the whole um, dress to cover myself. Um,
Wow.
yeah, trying to think some more of the positive. I mean, it's a beautiful culture with a beautiful cultural tradition. They still have the drumming, playing. Music is a big part of the culture. Hospitality is, I felt more at home in Iraq and less of a culture crash than here in Norway. I think that's
Wow.
what I was thinking in terms of positive. It's a culture because what we see in the news about Iraq is it's like the whole country is like a time bomb. It's not
Yeah. That's
like
kind of
that,
why I wanted to
There's
ask. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like it's 10. I had been in Baghdad. It's 10 million people in Baghdad.
Wow.
It's like it's not like you're going to be targeted
Mm-hmm.
like one in a 10 million chance. So yeah, that's the other part I wanted to say, that it's very, you know, hos- people are very um, tending, to you as a guest. They will give their lives to protect you, they feed you, they host you, I went there like not having anyone and I was taken care the whole 3 years I lived there. So
Wow.
yeah, that's to put things, in the
Mm-hmm.
in a context, in balance.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. Well, and I, yeah, there's much of what you said just about like, the portal, like sort of birth being a portal to this different way of being and, um, awakening that feminine part, divine feminine. What would you say? Would you say divine feminine, sacred feminine, goddess, none of the above? How do you talk about this?
I talk about the mother, the sacred mother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mother earth, the waters, the womb of life, the web of life.
Mm.
The, Yeah, that's constantly shifting, but that's kind of, it's more like an earth living, nurturing being.
Yes, I love that. Well, and I wonder, this weaving, this metaphor of weaving, which you've used already. I'm feeling that. So I'd love to just weave in. You referenced it earlier, but about the history of women drumming and just how that also came back into your life as a spiritual practice. And if that's not the right way to say it, then please correct me. But that's yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, yeah, the how I feel about it. It came back as a spiritual practice. I reclaimed it from, I say, intuitive drumming, which is how I call it. It's not about performance or perfection. It's about devotion and divine. And that's how that was kind of my big reclaiming. This is not about performing in a drum. This is not about how my voice sounds, even though, I struggled all of my life with this,
Yes.
performance, competitive, choir. And when I reclaim that this is devotion, this is spiritual practice, it just shifted my whole, relationship with the drum. And I want to say a lot, but um, I have to honor, perhaps starting with honoring the lineage, which I have learned. This is Lane Redmond. It's a American percussionist who wrote the When the Women Were Drummers. This
Yes.
The
Yes.
drummer were women,
I this has been
and
on my list to read for so long, and you're going to get me to do it. I'm hungry to read it. I have the longest list of books, but I really really want to read
uh,
this one.
yeah, this because it's and again it's weaving. I love this word. It's like she's weaving the spiritual history of rhythm of drumming, and it's about when the women were drummers. She goes into four main of the goddess cultures. She starts in Sumeria with Inanna, summer, Egypt with Isis, Anatolia, which Alessandra spoke a lot with Cibele.
Yes, and
Eh,
Alessandra Belloni, who's been on the show before. Yes, correct. Yeah.
yeah, and then the fourth culture is the Indus Valley culture, India,
Yes.
where were all the goddesses, Sarasvati, and she describes the goddesses. And what I love is that she weaves the drumming as a ritual and as a political tool. Women were the priestesses, they had political power because they were custodians of the spiritual life of their community.
Yes.
So they were using drumming for tending to life, death, rebirth, goddess, devotion. And she says, the priestesses were the connection between the divine and their community. They were just like, that portal, and they were using drum and rhythm to, to shift their consciousness and connect to the goddess. And yeah, again, it's like it doesn't go in a lot of detail into the goddess, but it goes into the ritualistic and the drumming part. And that she has a lot of pictures. And for example, here she says there was in Uruk in Iraq in the goddess Inanna. Let the drum and the tambourine resound. Let the sweet tiki music be played. Let all the lands proclaim my noble name. Let my people sing my praises. And this was like talking about Inanna, and how
Mm-hmm.
she should be welcome with the drum. And for me, it just speaks about this connection between the political and the spiritual, and how women were taking their power when they were taking the drums away.
Yes.
They cannot drum anymore, so they cannot. hold that space for their community.
Yes. Yes.
Mm,
So one thing that's coming up as you're talking is I'm thinking how beautiful it is that you had the opportunity to be in Iraq, which I don't know if a lot of people know, but we know what we hear on the news, right? And but the just absolutely rich and incredible divine feminine goddess history that comes out of that part of the world. So how special that you were to be able to be there, including a culture that has like this ancient drumming lineage, which I don't know if that was calling to you while you were there at all or not, but how
n-
beautiful that you moved through
no,
there and where you are now. Yeah.
yeah. And I was in the ziggurat, where the ancient temple of Isis was supposed to be before even
Wow.
the ziggurat. But at that time, I didn't know,
Wow.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So now it feels very special, very like, yeah, I
Yes.
needed to be there.
Yes. And I guess another question for you is when you drum now, do you feel some of that history in your bones and in your blood? Like, do you feel sort of that lineage? Like, I have a friend who talks about, we have our ancestral lineage, right, which is who we come from, our parents and our grandparents and all of that, and that gives us something. But that we also have a soul family lineage too that we are connected to, and sometimes that comes through in like art and particular spiritual practices. And so I wonder if you feel that way at all with the drumming.
Yeah, I feel definitely that earth, you know, connection speaking through me and speaking through the drum. And of course, I feel the connection with my ancestors who
Yes.
were keeping this lineage, my dad, his dad, and
Yes.
all that had to happen. When I think about that, all that had to happen for that to be here now. It's like that's what I want to honor. That's what I want to, yeah, you know, show my devotion to. Um, and of course, for me, it's the earth. For me, it's devotion to the earth. Many different people have different, the Black Madonna and the work of Alexandra. Other people to Isis or to Inanna. But I feel sometimes this energy weaving through, like Inanna, for example.
Yeah.
Uh, but most of the times for me is the earth that is speaking through me, through my world, through the drum. And I wanted also to speak to, because we haven't touched on it, to this piece of the voice, the drumming, but also the voice. I
Yes.
don't know if you want us to go,
Yes, please say yes. Talk to me about that and what comes up for you with that.
because I feel for the longest time I was thinking that that I don't sing this or that. And now that I have all this reframe of the sacred feminine and again the earth, I feel like, we're part of that weaving of of the earth, of the web of life. And this I got from Annie Williams. She's a musician, and she's been in Egypt. She talks about the sacred feminine. She speaks about us being part of the web of life and us being the creatresses and the chantress, and having that power through our voice to create the sacred, to speak the sacred. And when we don't do that, because I mean, and you do it through this podcast, you're using your voice, you're using your power to create
Yeah.
life. And when we don't do that because we think we can't sing, we can't be in tune or whatever is the story that we have, we are removing ourselves from the web of life, from our frequency, our intentions, our love, to be spread, to be those priestesses that were. So for me, singing and drumming are very interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
it's yeah, they're one and the same in a way, at least how I feel it. Like for me, when I pick the drum, I have to sing also. But I mean, it takes practice, of course, and it takes devotion, it takes intention. But yeah, I just wanted to put that piece of weaving ourselves into the song of life. And Annie says something about like each animal, each tree, each bird has a sound, whether audible or not, that weaves. Like we are co-creating. That's how I understand it. And when
Yes.
I don't sing, when I don't speak, I'm not part of that co-creation. It's like, what else, do we need to tell ourselves you know,
Yes.
to
Yes.
stop
And
us from singing, from drumming, from being together, from,
this resonates with me so much. I think one of the real there's many tragedies of our current patriarchal capitalist system, but one of those I think is the idea that song and um, all forms of art are like that skill set is held by a very small group of people, always men, um, usually white men, and that there's another body of critics, right, who decide what is good and what is not good. And if you're not, if you're not a master based on that kind of perspective, and also it's validated back to you by, like, I don't know, getting a record contract or a million followers or whatever, then it's not worth doing. And it's a tragedy, really. I mean, I really feel that in what you're saying too, like how important it is that we claim our voices. And I don't know if you feel this way, but like I would even include creative voice to include all forms of artwork too, like painting and poetry, and like just allowing it to move through us, right? Because that's divinity, isn't it? Like wanting to express itself through us.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Mm.
Hmm.
Yes, there was something else I wanted to say about that, and I can't. It flew out of my head. So we'll see if it comes back. I do want to ask you too, because you've mentioned the earth and this deep connection to the earth that is, woven into the feminine for you. Um, how that is expressing itself to you in terms of, well, in terms of lots of ways. But I would love to know your work with plants. I know that you do some work with plant wisdom, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about that from you as well.
Well, in concrete terms, I work with flower essences, while crafting, collecting plants from where I'm planted, because part of it for me is the intuitive connection and that kind of communication. That, hey, how are you? Do you want to, come with me?
Mm.
Or like, what is your, what is your medicine? And what I've realized is that many of the plants that grow here are plants to support womb health,
Mm.
like raspberry leaf, lady's mantle, yarrow, mugwort, and these are plants that were witch plants, like the women, the herbalists, the midwives were using to accompany and support birth, abortion, you know, all these menstruation, menopause, all these rites of passage. These are the plants that are growing around me. And it's like, I'm noticing, and
Yes.
I mean, since I gave birth, I've been interested in women's health, the politics of the body, reclaiming women's wisdom. So having these plants as guides and, supporting my work, it's been really humbling and really like, okay, like I'm supposed to, to share this this work, this wisdom, work with steaming, herbal steaming, pelvic steaming, uh, breast massage, oils for breast and boob massage. Uh, I mean, herbs are kind of, like been supporting us since we are here.
Mm-hmm.
This was our pharmacy before. And so just, learning, being in relationship for me is a big piece of what I do. That's why I like to use the plants that grow here, like I keep noticing new plants. It's like there's one that I noticed, I think the last 2 years, it's called shepherd's purse. It's an anti-hemorrhagic for, if you are having a hemorrhage during your birth. So this is a plant to support that. I'm like, okay, like,
Wow.
uh, and I start with from a place of curiosity, and I don't, like I don't use a plant if I don't know exactly. I use it more. For example, I start with the flower essence, which is more like an energetic support. So how is this plant, supporting my emotional health? Because flower essences, as opposed to other, like teas and herbal oils and tinctures, flower essences are the energetic. It's kind of capturing the personality of the flower, and that kind of interacting with your personality will have, like, an affinity. So for example, yarrow is for boundaries.
Mm.
Another one that I use, borage, for the heart. There are all these plants that, are supporting the heart health, the emotional health. Um Lady's mantle for womb healing, for trauma during birth, but working at the emotional level. So it's called vibrational medicine. So you can take it, children can take it, pets can take it, and it's something that works more like the energetic and emotional. And some people use it also to kind of detangle programming that we have against not being worthy, not being enough.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Mm.
So,
Well, and so it is because this is an area that's really interesting to me, and also like just brand new at understanding any of this. I know that I felt for me, and I'm lucky now I've got some space to grow some things on my own, So, but I know that for me, I've intuitively felt that it's important that I find things local, like that I, as opposed to, not that there's anything wrong, but everybody, you do you, people. But like, as opposed to just ordering something online and having it shipped to me, there's something that I personally am meant to learn by being in very close relationship here. Um, and at the same time, it all feels really daunting because I feel like I know nothing, like I'm just brand new. And so I'm wondering for you if, like, maybe could you give us an example of sort of like how a plant has kind of evolved and opened up as a teacher to you, and like what that relationship forming has looked like?
mm, yeah. Well, um, the quintessential one that I love is Rose.
Mm,
Rose is, wow, she is like she's connected in the kind of mythology to the goddess, to Mary, And when you look at Rose, she's gentle. Her fragrance is like so like intoxicating. And also she has thorns.
yes.
So it's like the physical appearance tells you how it does, in the energetic, in the emotional. And for me, and she's connected to the womb and the heart. These are the two feminine wisdom centers. So Rose to protect the heart, with the thorns and to support the womb,
Yes.
to support the creative, the luscious, the pleasure, you know, the, yeah, the creativity, the amazingness. Because when you think about a flower, she's like not having any hesitation to bloom. She's just blooming and being beautiful. And that's for me also like something like, okay, you are just beautiful and you don't have to ask anyone, am I beautiful? Like you don't have to ask for recognition, for permission. You're just like that, you know? And yeah, I feel like she's like really supported me. Like when I'm feeling grief or sadness, it's like rose. And another one I use is tulsi, they're plants of the heart,
Mm.
you know. And also like when you drink a tea, just sit with it and smell it and see how it, you know, feels in your body. Where in your body do you feel it? Just, you know, for curiosity. Do you feel it in your heart? Do you feel it in your chest? You know, when you feel it in your hips, in your legs, tingling, warm, you know? And that will tell you how that plant wants to interact and support you.
Yes.
And also, I pay attention to the thoughts because that also tells me a lot. It's like plants speak through the heart, and you know, you might have images, you might have thoughts that come that, interesting, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just being curious, being open and intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that helped.
Yes. Well, as a couple of things came up for me as you're saying that, I find this happens to me a lot where I think maybe sometimes I intuitively know things before I know that I know them. Do you know what I mean? Like, so as you're talking, I'm like, oh, right. When I lived in California, I had the most amazing rose bushes, and they did so well. They didn't need a lot of water, which was good because we were perpetually in drought, and they were stunning and beautiful, and just the fragrance would knock you over. My gosh! And the thorns were gigantic. I mean, none of these that you're going to buy in the grocery store. You really had to be careful with them. But those roses, and I had never been a rose kind of person from like a decorative flower, but oh my gosh, it was the best thing. Every spring I would like on rose watch to see when they were going to bloom. And of course, this is when the divine feminine was really starting to bloom in my life at the same time. Um, and then I later
Like bling
learned,
bling.
I know, right? And then I later learned, that, I mean, the rosary it's a garland. It started out as garlands of roses and flowers that were woven for goddesses. So everything that you're saying is making just makes so much sense to me. And it makes me wonder if and then maybe listeners, collectively, we know more than we're giving ourselves credit for, or like things are perhaps calling to us in ways that we didn't even realize. But then when we step back and we look, we're like, oh, okay, that's what was happening.
Yeah. And it's just opening to beauty, opening to abundance. It's like I've learned so much, you know, about abundance and just picking the raspberries. It's like, you know, this is here. It's just like
Yeah.
paying attention. And, you know, it's like a gift. And
Yes.
now everything is so, you know, the flowers and the berries. And it's like paying attention, being intentional. And that's showing us how, I don't know, I feel like as a woman also and as an image of the earth, we are also worthy, we're also abundant, we are also beautiful. Yeah, I don't
Yes.
know.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Um, yeah, I was also thinking too when I was in Ireland earlier this spring. Um, I felt like nettles were following me everywhere, and it was unusual because it's for those of you who know what nettles look like, it's not flowering. It's not like like a rose is really like, look at me, look how pretty I am. It's a green plant that will sting you. And I saw them growing actually outside of a Neolithic grave, like a Neolithic tomb. Like, oh my gosh, what are those underground tombs? I'm drawing a blank on what they're, passage tombs, passage graves. Not Newgrange, which is the really famous one in Ireland, but another one. I saw them there, and then I saw them everywhere. I felt like they were kind of following me around, which was super interesting. So then I've been learning more about them, of course, and I've learned, and in some ways, I feel like there's a similar to the rose in that it's extremely nurturing, and yet it's got very clear boundaries, right? Because it will sting you. So, and what a powerful message, like,
Yeah.
yes, self love, self care, so much nurturing to give, and
And
don't mess with me.
setting your, yeah, setting your
Yeah,
boundaries.
yeah,
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 I feel the same.
yeah, yeah.
And nettle to me is also like drop the drama,
I love that. I
like,
love that. Yeah. Yes. Yes. I love that.
hmm,
Well, and I wanted to ask you too, and I don't know if you felt like this on your own journey or if it's been kind of easier for you, but I'm curious in case any listeners feel like this too. Like some of the things that we are talking about, I know at least for me, I didn't get any exposure to any of this growing up. Like there's no discussion of plant wisdom, there's no discussion of like sacred voice and singing and connections to the earth and all of that. There was none of that, and so I think that sometimes it can feel really daunting. Like where do we oh God, there's so much we don't know. Where do we start? And so I wonder if you felt like that at all, have felt like that at all, and if you might have any, um, insights to share with listeners on like where do we, if we're sort of overwhelmed by what we don't know, like where do we begin?
hmm, yeah, there's so much to say, but like, go with where your curiosity takes you, and also start with one plant. For a long time, I was just like nettle and dandelion,
Mm-hmm.
nettle and dandelion. And there's also seasons. So, it's like nettle and dandelion, and then comes the rose, and then comes the yarrow. And then you start to pay attention to the cycles, and then you start to pay attention to the seasons, and then you start to pay attention to your inner seasons. I'm tired now. Boundaries, nettle. Maybe I want to take a nap, like maybe that's okay. That's my boundary now. Or
Mm-hmm.
maybe I want to make a tea or, and taste this. So very simple, very curious, um, very local, small. And then for me, what's been really helpful, or my batteries dying. Can I find the charger?
Yes, I'll pause the recording. Okay.
Uh, Synchronicity is what I wanted to say. Just let me get the charger.
Okay.
Syn- so synchronicity, and going with the cues. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about nettle, and then you go to the shop and you find the nettle tea, and it's like, okay, nettle tea, or yeah, someone comes with the roses, and you're like, roses, like let us explore, or like, I don't know, like a book. and has the title of the roses, or,
Yes.
things like that. Or like you're in conversation with a friend and you're like, oh, I'm working with nettle, and she's like, oh yeah, no, I also found some nettle. Let's make a nettle soup, like things like that. And if you have people you trust, like have these spaces for opening up. And for me, it's also a lot of, I'm a feeler, like connecting to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so if you feel like, if it's not weird or strange, you can sit by a favorite, tree or plant in your garden and start to, you know, open your heart and see what, because I feel that's how I get a lot of the messages and information.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I'm forcing it, but it's like I'm sitting here with this plant and I just, want to say like, thank you and being in reciprocity, but it's like from the heart. And I wanted to go a step further, but maybe we can leave it here because there's Stephen Harold Buhner, and he's talking a lot about this, like opening the heart and opening what he calls the sensory gating channels, places where we can feel,
Mm.
and that's how we connect, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
because we are, if you think about it, we are part. I mean, like there's the birds and the trees, and then it's us. But we are, part of that web of life. So it's like we don't know how to communicate, but there's communication happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes. And his name was Stephen. Did you say Stephen Buhner? Was that it?
Harold Buhner, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'll make sure I get that from you and put that in the show notes too, for those of you that are curious. Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, if you're still up for it, so Joanna and I talked about this before we started recording, but I'd ask if she would, gift us with a song to send us off. And if you're still feeling that, I would love to have you do that.
Hmm. Yes,
So you want to tell us about the
yes.
song? Like, tell us about the song you're going to sing for us.
Hmm. This song is called Ave Maria. It's a song I used to sing in church. And I remember also like always like Mary songs were so, I don't know, full of this, like emotion, like, when singing to Mary, I would always almost like cry. And I didn't understand why. It's like, the mother and this relationship with the mother. So this song speaks about our relationship, my relationship, or your relationship with her, and how we kind of forget, but we're coming back. And it's like, Ave Maria, listen to me. You know that I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of reclaiming this song as to, like I had forgotten about these songs and many of the songs I used to sing in the choir. When I had that split, remember we talked about it? It's like, I'm done with this life. And I remember when we first talked, I told you like it's for me difficult to connect again with Mary. And this summer I've been working again with Rose, and I felt that she came back to, to tell me that yeah, Mary is, she's like the lineage of the divine feminine that has survived, all these layers of patriarchy and
Yes. Yes, there's the
colonialism of our spirituality.
yes, there's the version that the church has given us, and then there's who she is, and those things to me are actually very different. Yeah. Hmm.
And remember when I think it was on the Facebook group, we talked about this, and I was like, but I'm not
Yes.
there yet. But now I'm there. It's like singing this song and kind of, yeah, reconnecting with that part of the divine and that part of my divine. So
Mm.
yeah, I would like to share it and we can share the lyrics. It's in Spanish, but just, sit and relax and take it in and see how you feel.
Hmm.
So I'll go ahead and take them.
Oh, you're muted. Let's see.
So this is my drum. And this is, I always start with my heart, to the heart of the drum, putting my intention. And
Mm.
my intention is to reclaim, this sacred song, devotion to Mary and to the sacred feminine. Mm. Es verdad que hace tiempo que te tengo en el olvido, que ni rezo, ni me acuerdo de llevarte rosas rojas al altar. Es verdad que el nombre no lo digo desde niña, pero ahora yo necesito que me ayudes y que olvides lo que he sido. Oh, Ave María, escúchame, Ave María, Ave María, tú sabes que yo te quiero, que eres todo lo que tengo. Oh, Ave María, escúchame, Ave María, Ave María, te pido que no termine. Recordarás cuántas noches te rezaba de rodillas. Mis amigos se reían, mirarme se reían. Oh, Ave María, escúchame,
Ave María, Ave María. Tú sabes que yo te quiero, que eres todo lo que tengo. Ave María, escúchame. Ave María, Ave María. Te pido que no termine nuestro amor, nuestro amor, nuestro amor.
Mm. So beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that gift. I was sitting here looking at, you can't see it on my camera for those of you who are watching as opposed to listening, but right across from my computer is this beautiful hand painted little plaque with Guadalupe, and which of course is, connected to the Virgin Mary as well as the indigenous Mexican goddess Tonantzin. And I'm holding in my hand a little chaplet that one of my podcast guests gave to me, my Threi Meliana, who was on the show last year and in 2021, and she went to Metagorgy, where there's been an apparition of the Virgin Mary seen, and so she brought a little chaplet. So I don't know, it's just just feeling all kinds of wrapped in divine feminine love. So thank you for that so much.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for holding the space for that.
Yes, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your beautiful heart with us. This is so special. Yeah.
Mm.
And I want to thank all of you listeners, too, as always, for being here. And Johanna mentioned the Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, if you're not, I understand it's a wild place to be sometimes, but there's a Facebook group called Home to Her. So if you want to engage in more divine feminine wisdom and insights and be in community with others, you can come and find us there. And yeah, thanks as always for being here. If you like the show, you can subscribe. You can leave it a 5-star review. You can tell all your friends about it. If you're listening, you can find the episodes on YouTube if you want to watch and just see what we look like. And I'll be sure to put some of the things we talked about in the show notes too. So if you've got questions, you can check them out. And until next time, take good care.